because Europe is a hereditary society, you have to remember the dead. It's the way that you recount ownership of land, rights and privileges, by remembering the deceased, by remembering your august ancestors. This hand-colored engraving of the triumph of death is a record of a mid-14th century wall painting from the Camposanto at Pisa in Italy. Now, the Camposanto suffered bomb damage in World War II, so it's from engravings like this one that we really can interpret the damaged wall paintings that have survived. We have a representation of a very popular fable of the three wealthy young men who come across three open graves with disintegrating bodies inside, and they are warned that this will be their fate. This French engraving of a tomb says in Latin and in French, what I am today, you will be tomorrow. So we've got all the great estates of man. We have the papal tiara, we have the imperial crown, and then running down we have the different orders of the French aristocracy and the coronets that they wear, and then a text that tells you to prepare for death. In this Dutch painting, man is in the center here, and John the Baptist, who is pointing to the story of the crucifixion and then Christ's victory over death. This speaks to the passerby, to the visitor. So, O Mensche, Gedanken, tot. So, O man, think of death. And then down here you have a biblical passage from Maccabees. It is a good and holy thing for you to think of the dead. In the center there, you have two panels that show kings, a medieval crown with a circlet and then bars rising up over the head to support an orb, and then in the lower one, it's a classical Roman wreath. We have, by a Dutch artist, Adrian Van Utrecht, a Northern European interest in painting the different textures and surfaces of objects. What's interesting about Adrian Van Utrecht is he carved out a niche market for painting objects and different materials, giving the suggestion of the silkiness of the surface of the flowers there and the sheen of the glass. And he was so good at this that great Baroque painters of Northern Europe, like Van Dyck and Rubens, would call him in to do the little still life elements of their paintings. So this is a man who has it all, and death walks in to say, all of this is meaningless. I can take it from you at any time. And through the door you see a skeleton. Death is warning a young man about the follies of following in the footsteps of the older man. So here we have the dance of death. 36 figures from all walks of life. Death comes to each one, and beneath the figure there's a little poem, Death Speaks, and the person he's come across replies. But what's interesting here is how playful death is, how death takes a hold of the living person, steals a piece of their clothing, or somehow mocks them or taunts them. This is 19th century, the sculptures here. But it's incredibly playful, dance of death. Here we've got a very self-satisfied burgher of Cologne, painted by Bartholomew van Bruijn. And then on the other side, we have his skull in a niche rather like the one that was in the background of his painting, and a text in Latin warning him about death and decay. What you see here, it's Psalm 116, and it reads in very clear Latin, placebo domine in regione, so I will please the Lord in the land of the living. I was curious to see these textile fragments here. I think they are identified as priests' clothing, although I wonder if they're not from a pall, which is the embroidered cloth that is placed over a coffin. But either way, this is part of the church service that takes place around the person's body. A book of hours is a devotional text, largely reduced form of services that monks would say, with the text directed usually towards the Virgin Mary. But at the back of the book, they always had the funeral service. And we have a number of pages here from books of hours. Here's one which shows somebody preparing for death. So the dying person is stretched out in bed. Family have gathered round. Prayers are being said. And in the Middle Ages, it was believed that the most effective prayers for the dead were those said at the funeral service. So you tried to get as many people to attend as possible, and you had your funeral service repeated. So you could, if you were Henry V of England, you had 10,000 masses said on your death. A good death would look much more like this, with the presence of a priest and the dying person receiving the viaticum, the extreme unction. Here in this Protestant country, it's just down to the presence of the Bible by his bedside, and that he has lived well, whereas the person who is not prepared for death, well, he's knocked over the table that has drink and food. He's a glutton. We also know he's suffering from gout. His foot is bound again. And while the dying person sort of lies back and accepts his fate, the unprepared man here is shocked by the sudden appearance of death. Down here, Richard has a woodblock print, Christ and Death, but it's by the artist who trained Dürer. And Albrecht Dürer was arguably the greatest printmaker of the Western world. And then we have a number of Dürer prints hanging on the wall. There's the famous Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And then right in the bottom left is the mouth of hell, a gaping, devouring beast's mouth. And we also have Dürer's knight figure here, and then here another moralizing tale of sacred and profane love, this wild man kissing the beautiful woman. Here is that image of Adam and Eve with really a skeleton standing in for the tree. My school chapel was Canterbury Cathedral, so it's lined with tombs down the side and images like this glaring at you through Sunday sermon. And so these were just some of my thoughts looking through Richard's collection of, and focusing mostly on the Old Master period, medieval to 1800. So thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you.